Welcome everybody to the WhyHunger podcast. And at WhyHunger, we believe that nutritious food is a human right and hunger is solvable. And that's why we work with grassroots organizations and social movements across the globe to fight hunger and bring a hunger-free world. So on today's show, I'm very happy to have a special guest, the owner and founder of Woke Foods. We have Ysanet Batista. Ysanet, how are you doing today?
Hi, Colin. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
So glad to have you. So, Ysanet, I wanted to get started and just ask you, can you just tell us a little bit about what Woke Foods is about, and also just explain a little bit about how culture and social justice tend to play a part in the culinary kind of educational aspects of what Woke Food provides?
Yeah, Woke Foods is a worker-owned cooperative that
Mm-hmm.
focuses on plant-based Dominican and Afro-Caribbean foods. We're based in New York City, and we are a worker-owned cooperative is a business that all the people that work there also own it. So I get to work with a group of intergenerational Black women from the Caribbean, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, and also our lead chef right now is a Black American woman from the South, but with roots also in the South Bronx. And so I say all that to say and all these identities because
Right.
that's a big part of culture, and the reasons that woke foods is called woke foods comes from when the Black Lives Matter movement started. There was a lot of people saying, stay woke,
Right.
and
Right.
that was a push for people to become aware of the ways that like politics and systemic oppression um,
Mm-hmm.
intersects in our lives and impacts our lives and manifests in our lives. And one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that I was learning through the farming community that I had just became a part of was the ways that diet related illnesses was, I think, the number one reason or killer of Black and Indigenous people. And
Mm-hmm.
so I started to make those connections, and then it became we also have to stay woke or stay aware about our food and the ways that racism has it so that our communities are left at the margins and are not given access to fresh food. So that's where the
Mm-hmm.
word or the name of the business came, Woke Foods. And so as you can see
Mm-hmm.
that it is rooted in social justice. It doesn't start as opposed to like other food businesses, doesn't start out of like, this dire need to like put plant-based food on the map. It's really this dire need to nourish our communities
Mm-hmm.
and need to nourish our people at the front lines in social justice
Mm-hmm.
movement work, because the kind of work they're doing is hard and emotional labor, physical or intensive. And so we wanted to create something that could feed the movement of social justice.
As a queer Black Latino, what are some of the dynamics that you tend to find as far as LGBTQ representation within the food justice movement, and also if you can expound further on that, like how has it impacted what you're doing with Woke Foods, and also how has it impacted LGBTQ communities?
I think there is a lot of queer representation, LGBTQI representation in the food justice movement, um, compared to maybe like the culinary arts world, or in my experience, not that there isn't, but in my experience. And I think particularly, um, I have seen that it's not just queer representation, but it's like queer people, queer Black people that have an analysis, have an understanding of social justice, and so they bring that into the food justice. That it's like it's not just about growing food, it's about growing food because if we grow food for ourselves, then that means that we have a more opportunity to not depend on the systems that don't give us rights, don't prioritize our needs. and so it kind of goes in alignment. And I think also a lot of us understand the history of of food and the history of land struggles, and we are I see that many of us are really invested in understanding um, like like land sovereignty and like what it means to um, think about the first people of the United States, which they call Turtle Island, and indigenous people didn't believe in gender. There was like the gender spectrum um, was comes from like from people in Europe who then colonized our lands, and so that those are conversations that happen, and so a lot of the conversations is around the expansiveness and the connection between like who we are as individuals and how many similarities we find in nature. Like I know in farm school, one of my favorite classes was propagation, and it was taught by a queer teacher, a queer Latinx teacher, and we learned about like asexual propagation and the ways that like plants were actually very queer. And so I appreciate that there is like this expansiveness that gets brought into the food justice movement by LGBTQI people and queer people, and that people who are trans or gender non-conforming, or I prefer to say gender free. People that are gender free feel like really at home in this movement, because it's like you're working with food, you're working with land. It's about caring for each other, and I think care and safety is something that a lot of us queer people look for.
And I know in that, just alone within that particular kind of fight and with social justice, and especially just looking at the food movement overall, I know that it tends to come with some challenges, especially with the undertaking choosing to own woke foods and own an organization that's dedicated to the work that you do. So could you share like what are the challenges you say you face, and also to juxtapose what are some of the triumphs that you faced since starting woke foods?
I think people really, especially people in my Dominican community, really drew to woke foods because many of them were wanting to transition to a plant-based diet over already, either plant-based, vegan, or vegetarian, and were like, oh my goodness, I have been looking for something like this, and this is such a relief to see my foods that I grew up with represented, and also not just represented, but made, and the vegetables highlighted, especially the root vegetables like yuca, cassava, plantains, yams, malanga, all of these things. And so that was, I think people felt like a sense of relief, and so that has been good. And I think we also have received a lot of media attention, which was surprising, but definitely put us on the map. So, yeah, that's been a triumph. I think also a personal triumph has been seeing that I could create like economic survival from something that I enjoy, something I'm actually passionate about and is connected to my values. Um, and that I get to bring my values to shape something versus having
Mm,
to turn to convince an organization to adopt my values. So I
right,
say that's
right.
a so I say that's a triumph. The greatest
Mm,
challenges is because woke foods has so many like niche things that we do. People sometimes have a hard time understanding, and I think also a challenge for me is I don't necessarily believe in I don't believe in the way our economic system runs. I think
mm,
it wasn't created to see black people, succeed like at the root of it. And
mm,
so I'm really trying to like reimagine how to have a business that makes money without like experiencing burnout, without experiencing like that, I'm giving it my blood, sweat, and tears. I don't want to give anything my blood, sweat, and tears. I want it to be
Mm-hmm.
easeful. I want it to feel good because that's how I
Mm-hmm.
feel about food and land. And so, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out how to do that and to do some things that are a little bit outside the box with woke foods.
It's interesting when you say that you want to, kind of reimagine with what the way the structure works with what you do with woke foods. And I have to ask, I would want to know, like, what are your hopes and intentions for the future of food justice, whether it's through woke foods or how woke foods influences others? Like, what do you see for the future of food justice with everything that you're doing?
I hope there is more more people that are able to have access to growing their own food. I have like sometimes this dream. I'm from Harlem, and we have a lot of like buildings with fire escapes. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I had this dream like even in the quarantine, like everyone would have like a fire escape garden.
Yeah,
So just
that'd be
so
beautiful.
just to begin with, yeah, to begin with, people being able to grow food where they are, or farmers who are the reason why we have food, for them to have actual land access. So the
Mm,
food system was created in this country on the backs of black people, by black people, using the technology, the knowledge of our ancestors. And
mm,
also now it's predominantly like immigrant people, not only from South and Central America, but also from like the Caribbean islands, like Jamaica, the Dominican Republic. Those are also people that are still coming to the United States to do farming labor. And I think, not I think, they should have land access. So that's
absolutely.
part of food justice. I think also, um, our city and state politicians not trying to like interject themselves in everything. I think
Mm,
sometimes there is a big movement right now trying to replicate or trying to scale everything up, and micro works really beautifully. My One of my favorite authors, Adrienne Marie Brown, says small is good, small is all. And so if micro communities could have more power over the decisions that they want to adopt in their community when it comes to food access
mm.
and what they want, then I think they should be able to do that.
Well, I want to thank you so much for the information you provided today and for being with us today, Ysanet. Greatly appreciate it. Could you let our audience know where they can find more information about the work that you're doing in Woke Foods, um, and how they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, folks can go on our website, which is wokefoods, wokefoods.coop. And
Hmm.
then we are pretty active on Instagram. So that's instagram.com/wokefoods or at wokefoods.
Great. Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Ysanet. And thank you, everybody, for joining us here on the WhyHunger podcast. Please remember to hit like and subscribe on our YouTube. And also, for more information about the work that WhyHunger does and the movements that we work with, please visit whyhunger.org. I want to thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Take care.